In this lesson, we're going to practice our subdivision surface modeling by creating this cookie. It has enough interesting details to pose a bit of a challenge, but also it's not overly complex, and since it's mostly flat, it's pretty forgiving. So it should be a good thing to practice on. In the downloads for this course, I've provided a PNG of the cookie logo, and I'll drag and drop that right into Blender. Then to center it, I'll make sure it's selected and then hit Alt-G and Alt-R. Then I'll hit F2 and name this cookie reference, or just ref for short, and I'll select the cube and delete it. Now to make this image a little bit easier to work with, I'll select it and then go to the image properties. I'll turn on opacity and turn this down quite a bit. That way we'll still be able to see our vertices and edges while we're working in wireframe view. And I'm also going to turn on only axis aligned and turn off perspective. That way we don't see it when we're orbiting around our 3D view, but if I hit 7 on the number pad to jump to top orthographic view, then we can see it and model directly on top of it. So that way it's not in the way when we don't need it, but we can see it when we're modeling from the top. Now there are two ways that we could approach this. We could either create the outside shape first and then work our way inwards, or we could create the inside shape first and work our way outwards. I've done both and they each have their pros and cons. Working outside in means that we get a perfect circle all the way around right away, but trying to nail the correct vertex count right out of the gate to make the eyes and the mouth exactly the way that we want is a bit of a guessing game. So instead, I'll create the eyes and the mouth first, and then as long as that's reasonably even all the way around, then I'll just take whatever vertex count we end up with and turn that into a circle. So first I'll hit Shift-A, add mesh and plane. I'll rename this to cookie, and then hit Tab to go into edit mode, Z to toggle on wireframe, and then I'll just line this up with the corners of the eye on the right. Okay, so it's obvious that we need at least a couple more edge loops to support this shape. So I'll add 3 going horizontally, and then I'll line those vertices up with the outside of the eye. That looks like it should be a good amount of detail. And then I'll add 2 edge loops going up. That way we can define the top and bottom pretty well, and just round this out. Okay, now that we have that, I'll do the same thing for the eye on the left. But instead of adding a new plane, I'll just hold down Control, and as long as nothing else is selected, if I right-click, I can just place a new vertex wherever I want. So I'll place 4 just around the corners, select the whole thing, and hit F to fill and make a face. All right, then I'll position my vertices such that the bottom is more towards the bottom. And then I'll add those same edge loops. Control R, and then I'll add 3 edge loops going horizontally. And I'll try to match it up with the eye on the right, such that it's really easy to fill in this space in the middle. And then I'll add 2 more edge loops and make that shape up at the top. And there we go. Off to a pretty good start. Now what we want to do is create a loop that runs all the way along the outside of the eye. Right now the edge loops are running straight through, but we want one of those support loops that goes all the way around and protects that edge from any pulls that we're going to have to make. So I'll select the edge loops that go all the way around the eye on the left, and then hit E, S to scale, and scale that up. Now it's not going to be perfect, so we'll go ahead and just adjust the vertices after the fact. I'll try to make sure everything's lined up well, and then I can do the eye on the right. Control, Shift, left click, just to select all of those loops. E to extrude, S to scale. And that one looks a whole lot better pretty much right away. Now we don't have a whole lot of room over here on the right with this part of the cookie. So we could either cram this really close to the eye like this, or we could also just fudge the concept a little bit and pretend that this is farther out. And I think I'll go with that second one because that'll make things a lot easier. But now that we have the eye outlined, let's also go ahead and do this with the mouth. Now we already have an edge loop that's kind of following along that shape down here, but just for these 2 edges. So I'll select those, E to extrude, and pull those down towards the mouth. I'll go to edge select mode, select the left edge, and just use this to go all the way around the mouth. Here on the left side, I'll rotate this a bit, E to extrude, R to rotate, so I can take that corner. I'll make sure there's one edge loop here in the middle. And then as it gets towards the left side, I'm going to make sure that I have the same number of edge loops on the bottom as I do on the top. And that way we can really easily connect them later. Then I'll add 2 more on the right side, just like so. And then select the start and the end and hit F to fill. Or more accurately, F to make face, but you know what I mean. Now it looks like I should move this edge loop a little over, maybe this one down a bit. We don't need to get too detailed here because the subdivision surface will be doing a lot of work. But I will add an edge loop here on the top to match the one on the bottom. And then I'd also like to make this detail here where he's kind of biting his lip a little bit. And so I'll add another edge loop on the bottom left to line up with the left point of that. And then I'll add one more loop on the top just to match. So now that we've outlined all of the most important parts in the face, we could start connecting all of this, but we also don't know how many vertices we're going to need to create these bites over on the right. And if we need extra vertices, then we can run them straight through the eye, or maybe add 1 or 2 towards the mouth. It's really flexible so far. So let's go ahead and add our other important edge loops and keep these areas flexible before we start connecting everything together. A really big part of modeling is just recognizing which areas are flexible that can be easily changed later, and saving those for later when you have other more important decisions to make first. Now for these bites, I'll outline them in a very similar way that I did the left eye, where I'll just hold down Control, right click, and place a point. Though we're in edge select mode, so we can't see it. So I'll hit 1 to go to vertex select mode. And then once that's selected, I can just continue holding down Control and left click to place a couple points and extrude them out like so. For this one, I'll roughly match what we have with the eye, though it looks like we might have to add a couple more. We'll see how it goes. But let's at least add 2 per bite, plus the corners. And this one at the top, I'll just add 1. So I think we might be able to get away with that, but we'll see. Now here, instead of having an edge loop that runs all the way down like this, what we want to do is crisscross these loops at all of these points. Because if we make a loop like this and we subdivide it, it'll just get smoothed out and we won't get these sharp edges. However, if I follow this down with an edge loop like so, and then create another edge loop that crisscrosses that way and ends up over here, and kind of crisscross all of these different points, then we can sharpen them up really easily. So to show you what I mean, I'll take this vertex, that's part of the second bite, and I'll take this whole edge, E to extrude, and I'm going to be doing this thing pretty often in this project where I extrude, and then I want to snap one vertex to some other vertex. So to make this a lot easier, I'll switch over to vertex snapping. That way I can hit G, move this around, and then hold down Control, and then just snap to a neighboring vertex. Now that snapped it to it, but it didn't merge the two. So they're still separate vertices, and I'm going to be merging things a lot in this video. So what I'll do is actually just turn on auto merge over in the top right in the tool settings, where you can go to options and turn on auto merge. And that way when we place one vertex directly on top of the other, then they get merged no problem. So that's going to make things a lot easier to work with. For example, I can just take this edge, E to extrude, hold down Control, and snap it up there. So this is the kind of loop that I'm looking for, where it goes from one corner to the other. And then if we add a loop going down, which means we'll need to add another edge loop up here, so that I can take this edge, E to extrude, rotate this around, and it just looks like this is way too much to stretch, because if I snap this down here, that's a really stretched loop. That doesn't look very good. So I'll add another edge loop and kind of smooth this out a little bit, just like so. And I won't merge these quite yet. I might want to merge them, but I'm not 100% sure. So I'll leave them separate for now, and then we can maybe merge them later if we need to. But this one, I want to end right over here on the right. So I can also add a new vertex right in the middle of an edge by hitting Control R. And it's like adding a loop cut, but in this case, it's just a vertex. So if you do a loop cut command on a single edge, then you'll get a single vertex in the middle. And then I'll select all 4 of those and hit F to fill. Okay. And then we also need yet another new edge loop, it looks like, because we have the loop that runs around in this direction, which is great, but now we need one that goes in this direction. And again, this face is a little bit too big to fully extrude all the way like that. And also we could use another edge loop to define this curve a little bit better. So I'll add that in. And you know what? I don't really want this eye here while I'm working because I know it's kind of in the way and I know I'll move everything off to the left a little bit later. But for now, I don't want to think about it. So I'm going to hit L while hovering my mouse over the eye or over a component of the eye. It looks like in wireframe view, you have to hover over a vertex or an edge. And then I'll just hit H to hide. So we have to remember that that's there and just hidden. But now I can work without having to worry about that. Just one piece at a time. Then I can take this edge down here, E to extrude, hold down Control, and just continue bringing this all the way along. And I'm going to want to snap that up over here. So I could take these 4 vertices, F to fill, and again, that's a really big face. So let's go ahead and sharpen this up a little bit and add a new edge loop here in the middle. Just like so. So we're getting this series of crisscrossing edge loops right along the bites. That's exactly what we want. I can do the same thing here. E to extrude, R to rotate, Control to snap, E to extrude, Control to snap. All right. One thing that you'll notice that I do a lot is I kind of fill in a big stretched face and then I add an edge loop in between. And that's just one of the habits that I've picked up where I do the extreme move first and then I go through and fix it. So I know the most important thing here is to get the loop in the right place. So as long as I connect the faces in a way that makes the loop, then I know I can always clean it up later on pretty easily. So here everything is going to be pretty squished in next to the eyeball. And I don't know if I want it to be quite that squished. So what I'll do is I'll just take everything. Actually, let me take these set of vertices here, and then I'll turn on proportional editing. That way I can hit G, and you'll see that circle pop up. I can scroll down or up to increase or decrease the size of that circle, and move everything around the selection in proportion. So I'll move this over to the right just a little bit. Nothing too crazy. I can also rotate this if I need to. But then I can also just take out just the points a little bit more. So I'm kind of cheating the concept art, but this is going to make it a lot easier to model. And I don't think anybody's going to really notice. Maybe Wes, who has looked at the logo every single day of his life for the past, how many years? Since 2008? I don't know. He might notice, but maybe not even that. So let's go ahead and just work with it like this. Give ourselves more breathing room. And I'm trying to make the width of this pretty even all the way along. That's going to help keep the subdivision surface looking a lot more even. It doesn't have to be exact, but something like that should be good. And then I'll hit Alt-H to bring back my eyeball, and we can see what we can merge over here. So these 2 vertices are incredibly close together already, so I may as well just take one, Control, snap it to the other, and merge that down. These 2 are also super, super close, so I'll merge those just like so. And then I'm not 100% sure what I want to do down here yet, so I'll save that decision for later, and let's continue working up here. These 2 vertices are extremely close, but if I merge them, then that's going to make a triangle here. And that's not the worst thing in the world, but we may as well make quads. So I'll take both of these, hit F, and that makes some kind of skinny quads. We can also do that up here. F to fill. And so it's not great that these are so skinny compared to everything else that's around. But again, these are part of the just fill loops or fill areas that are a lot less important than the main defining loops. So I'm not too worried about it. But if this ends up giving us any sort of pinching or trouble, then we can definitely add in other loops later to fix it. But for now, I think this looks okay. And it also keeps things nice and simple. Now, since this loop is also running along in this direction, I may as well continue this up all the way towards the top. So I'll hit E to extrude a couple times, hold down Control and just snap. And here's where we can start defining the outside of the circle. So to make this go a little bit faster, even though we don't know the exact number of vertices that we're going to need, let's just create a circle and then we can add or remove vertices as we go. So I'll zoom out, hit Shift-A, add a circle. And for this one, let's use, I'll say 20 vertices. We'll probably need a little bit more than that, but it's always pretty easy to add them in later. So I'll scale this up and place this right over there. And the nice thing about this with 20 vertices is that we have 2 points that are right next to the points on our cookie. So I can just select all the extra vertices, delete and vertices, and the rest of this is sitting nicely in place. To give an edge loop all the way around, I'll just hit E to extrude and S to scale down, and then also just move it over to the right a little bit, since the scaling kind of shifted it over to the left, since it's not a complete circle. Okay, so then we can see that it's pretty clear that we can just fill this in as a quad and continue this loop all the way around. That's exactly what we want to do. I'll shift this over a little bit. And then let's also fill this in as a quad down here. So now we've outlined all of the important parts, we have our main loops, and now the puzzle is just how to fill this in a way that makes sense.